Another interesting piece of news you were mentioning is about the change in appraisals. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that might be really interesting for realtors to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are huge appraisal changes coming nationwide. So this is like
Mm.
across the board, and from a very high level perspective, because it's super technical. And as someone who's not an appraiser, um, I don't know if you want me getting into the nitty gritty, but essentially what's happening is they are redoing their forms. Let's say,
Mm.
okay, so.
We know all about that.
Sure do. So what's happening is the forms are actually the ones that they are currently using are set up for typewriters. So what they're doing is
Oh,
they're bringing everything into 2026, and it's going to be cloud-based reporting. And so appraiser is going to go in, and there's no longer going to be separate. Like there's not going to be a multifamily form or a condo form, or there's all going to be drop downs. Right. So the appraiser is going to go through and they're going to select what they're doing. And then the information will kind of drop down from there. And it's a huge change because it's actually Michelle Jakalski Bradley, who is I think one of the biggest
hmm.
appraisers around. And she does a lot of work with the Pennsylvania Association and
Yeah.
certainly the National Association. Um, and she was just telling me about this. I just actually had her on my podcast talking about these changes. And what she was telling me is that this is the largest and the biggest appraisal change in modern history. So
Wow.
updating these forms. And what she was focusing on was saying, okay, what's changing? The
Mm.
methodology isn't changing. How they
Okay.
think about value and how they assess and all of that, that's not changing, but it's the process. And why it's such a big deal is because even though right now they don't have to switch over to this new process until November of 2026 is when this all kind of kicks off. But and I should say this is for residential property,
Okay.
single family detached or 1 to 4 units. So this isn't affecting commercial. This isn't affecting anything else aside from residential. And residential loans sold on the secondary mortgage market, right? So, and that's a
Okay.
majority of if someone's buying a house that's on the
Hmm.
MLS and they're getting a loan, it's affecting this.
Okay.
It does not affect things like independent appraisals for estates or divorces or things like that. This is just it's being driven by Freddie and Fannie. So,
Okay.
so definitely something to note. But what she was saying was so important to remember is the average age of an appraiser is in their 60s,
Mm.
and some of them have been in the business for 40 years, and you have new technology coming in, and so she thinks that there is going to be, along with, I think what she had quoted was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac saying that there could be potentially a 20% decrease in appraisers,
Oh,
like
wow.
physically, doing this particular work. So
Hmm.
some might be retiring early.
Hmm.
Some might just not be doing that. So you're going to have potentially less appraisers in the marketplace to do an appraisal. And there's going to be a learning curve, right? And so, again, 30,000 foot view of what's going on, it- supply and demand, right? So you're going to have less appraisers. But if we're going into, let's say, spring market right now, maybe some of these appraisers are going to be going into this new process. Maybe some will wait until November. But you're going to have fewer appraisers available and potentially more homes on the market. This could change the way that we practice. Maybe our mortgage commitment dates are going to have to be longer.
Mm.
Maybe we're adding in a week or two before, you're closing, right? So it's a huge change, and it's going to affect almost every aspect of the transaction, really, when you think about it, if you're getting a loan, right?
Right.
So big change coming through.
What would you recommend realtor practitioners do then? Is it having those conversations up
Absolutely.
front? Hmm.
Absolutely. The best thing, and we touched on this in the episode, the best thing that we as practitioners can do is in that initial consult when you're meeting with either a buyer or a seller to let them know there are appraisal changes happening, and not to even dig deeper into the weeds, but additional changes are going to be things like the seller needs to let the appraiser know, or whether it's on the disclosure, et cetera, when they estimated something was done, like from a renovation perspective. And
Interesting.
so let's say it was a partial renovation when when was that partially renovated? And if they don't have the answer to that, the appraiser is going to have to make that estimation. And so I'm sure that there's, through the appraisal process in general, there are estimations that, educated estimations that the appraiser makes if information is not being provided. But now I believe it's mandated where that, like, if something is left blank or they can't, or if a seller can't tell somebody when something was done, it now falls to the appraiser to make an educated estimation of what they think has been done to the property at what point. And so I think that there's, and if you listen to the podcast or listen to Michelle
Yes, we will
Chikowski,
tune in on this.
definitely, or just if you have an opportunity to talk to her, I know she's speaking at PAR and she's on the circuit right now, letting everybody know about what's happening. Best thing that you can do as a practitioner is get in front of this with your clients. Tell your sellers, hey, this is what's going on. It could delay the process, make it longer. Same thing with buyers. Hey, we're going to have an appraiser go out there, and if they're not using the process and haven't been familiarized with the new form and all the online form and everything, could take longer. Learning a new tool, a new technology, there's always a learning curve. So getting in front of it as best you can with them is the biggest piece and best piece of advice I would give someone. Otherwise, who knows how long it's going to take. And, and the thing that I thought was very interesting in speaking with Michelle, the appraisers aren't the bad guys, right? Like a lot of the time it's so easy to pass the buck and say, oh, the appraiser messed up the deal or, whatever. And that's not necessarily the case, right? Like they're assigning value as we're, doing price, right? So it comes into, having a conversation with an appraiser for an hour and kind of going through everything was eye-opening for me, right? And Michelle is fabulous. I've known her for a few years now, going through, Harrisburg and PAR and all of that. So she's a wealth of knowledge and information, and I would definitely recommend checking her out. But huge changes coming that we can get in front of in our initial consults.
Simply with a conversation and just having that open communication. And it's a good alert for consumers as well to start, tracking some of those notes in your home repairs so that you can make sure that your value is conveyed, and everybody to have a little bit more patience with the process because things are changing and everybody needs to learn, and that's the best way to do a good job.
Yeah. And change is inevitable. We can't fight it. And this will help. And she said that they've been working on this for the last 8 years. They've been talking about this change coming for the last 8 years, and it's finally here. And the idea is to make it a smoother transaction. But there's going to be hiccups along the road, just like with any changes. We've experienced our own changes on the real estate side of it, on the real estate practitioner side of it. August of 24, we've experienced changes. And so those were, there's always going to be bumps in the road until people the dust settles and people figure out how to navigate through it. It's going to be the same thing from an appraisal side. Only we have a longer lead time knowing that it's coming, and we have the ability to educate the consumers and not just worry about the contract, but go beyond the contract and have those conversations about transparency.